Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And yes, we are counting down to kickoff, as they like to say. It's less than an hour until the Seahawks play an important game against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. One of these early games, which I think we as fans really enjoy. Not always a favorite for the West Coast teams, but we get to make up for lost time with Jeff Simmons, at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. We couldn't make it work yesterday, Jeff, but I'm glad we could make it work this morning. How you doing, my friend?
I know. I was going to ask if we lost track of days or something. I'm not used to seeing you on Sunday mornings.
I know. I mean, I just booked it back from Leavenworth, Washington, a couple hours driving through the dark to get here in time. And the benefit of not sleeping well in general, Jeff, is I was like, oh yeah, I'm up at 5. I might as well just get on the road. Why not? And
no traffic.
Here we are. Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, we should get right into it because there's news right away. We got Kenneth Walker is active. We got a little scare yesterday that he was added to the injury report as questionable with an illness. And we just heard no more than a few minutes ago that Kenneth Walker is going to be active today. So that to me feels like a pretty big deal, Jeff.
Yeah, they're already battling uphill with some of the injuries they have right now. And we're going to talk about that, I assume. But you went over the game plan, the tail of tape. Walker is super important in this game. And that was really mysterious yesterday. He just sort of popped up out of nowhere. It's his birthday today. So people are kind of having some fun or something. But then Rappaport and Schefter always put out these tweets at 3 a.m. where all the guys who you're not sure if they're going to get injured. And they covered pretty much every player except for Walker. So when I woke up 7 a.m. my time today, and I'm like, oh my God, there's nothing on Walker. So I got nervous. I was kind of refreshing all morning and then was relieved to see him off the inactive report.
Well, I got to say, I was listening on the drive over to the 710 pregame show, and I thought I heard Dave Wyman give away some inside information in a bad way. And he's like, has it come out that Kenneth Walker's not going to play yet? And they're like, no. I was like, oh, God, he knows. He knows that he's not going to play. And look, Jeff, we'll talk about this. Neither of us think that this is a game that you should expect the Seahawks to win. This is not a game you should expect them to win. Wish we could, but I don't think that's a reasonable thing to do. No. But I think they can win. I don't think this is a 70-30 kind of game. And Kenneth Walker is so important for this game plan. Falcons play a lot of zone. There's a lot of running back receiver yards out there. Kenneth Walker's a huge part of it. When you do get open space against this run defense, which is also not good, you want the explosive potential, not just the 8-9 yards. Maybe he can go 30, 40, 50. And as much as I like Zach Charbonnet, and I'm fine with Kenny McIntosh getting some chances, those guys aren't the same players. So I feel good. I was like, man, come on. We got enough going on the injury front. Just give us Kenneth Walker. Hopefully he is feeling well enough to be, full go in this game.
Yeah, I think there's a case he's the best player on the team. And his position, Nathan would come out and tell us that running backs don't matter. And I would agree with that. It's not the position I'd want to have the best player, but I think there is a pretty good case. So anytime he plays this year, I'm happy to see him out there.
Well, let's go over the rest of the inactives because there's some interesting ones on there. As I pull this up, so we've already talked about the fact that Mike Jarrell is going to get his first start. Or at least I talked about it. I haven't talked about it with you. I'm super excited about it. And, look, he's a 6th-round rookie. First-round rookies struggle in their, when they play, period. So I don't expect him to be great, but I'd love to see a little bit of promise. Can he hold up in pass protection a little bit better? Can he maybe create some push in the run game? Can he just not be a total disaster the way Stone Forsythe has been at times the last few weeks, where honestly Stone Forsythe has been the worst starting tackle in the NFL over the last 3 games?
Yeah, and I'm with you. I just want to see something different at this point. Obviously, Jarrell He's a 6th-round rookie from a small school that was not in Division One, but he's not like an untalented player. Like he had offers to go over to an NIL to switch schools, and he wanted to stay at Finley. And I remember he did that interview on your show right after the draft. He was a pretty interesting guy. Like some big schools were looking at him, but I think with Forsyth, we've seen it now. Last year, this year, we've seen what he is, and it's just a low upside player. And you've heard me talk about low upside players before.
Mm-hmm.
It's as like uninteresting to watch. Being bad and boring is horribly uninteresting.
Yes.
Type is bad and boring, and like unfortunately, he had some promise as a left tackle when he was drafted, and he's barely a backup in my opinion. And when
Yeah.
he big sample size, we see it. And this is a game where I just want to see more interesting players, and that's why some of the players that our shows tends to turn against are the ones that just provide such little upside that it's not even fun to watch them.
That's such a great point. I mean, I think that people wonder about why we get negative or, maybe for the last few years, a big part of it is who are the players that you're like, okay, here's our future. Here's our foundation. Here's a guy that you can believe is going to be great, that other teams are going to have to deal with, that you feel like is just going to be a factor each and every game, or at least has the potential to grow into that. And you see the flashes. And there's just been like even the ceiling games that you see for some of these players have been so low that it's just like, maybe they touch Pro Bowl level every once in a while, but they're not like all pro. They don't like you want your Pro Bowl players to touch all pro every once in a while. You want your starters to touch Pro Bowl level every once in a while, and then you got your, true blue chippers that are just consistently, all pro kind of players. Seahawks just haven't had as many of those. And I think Kenneth Walker certainly fits into that category. DK Metcalf at times fits into that category. And then, with Mike Jarrell, no, you're not looking for him to be a blue chip player. But this is our first chance as well, Jeff, to see a player that was drafted by this offensive line coach, this offensive coordinator with John Schneider, that then had a chance to be developed, was not guaranteed a spot on the roster, let alone to make the roster, and then he got on the roster, and then he became the backup. So he's moved up the depth chart. So this is our first chance to see a player that they have developed, whatever that looks like. And let's hope. let's hope he shows some promise. I think that's what we want to see. Because Jeff, the other thing that's interesting here is McClendon Curtis is not brought up from practice squad. So you have Charles Cross, Mike Jarrell, and then I think, is it Jalen Sundell is the only other guy that has any tackle background? I mean, I guess Anthony Bradford played some tackle in college. I don't know, man. It gets pretty thin after that.
Well, you're down to your 4th-string right tackle, and then I was wondering, okay, who's the swing tackle if someone gets injured? So, process of elimination, I think it is Sundell. And Oluwatimi was active today. He hasn't been active the last couple games. So we better hope these guys can stay on the field. But yeah, I think you make a good point with Jarrell. I think he's a guy that's just going to be interesting to watch. And it's crazy enough, this rookie class has a huge impact in this game. And between Byron Murphy and the corner, and it's just the depth of this class is really going to be tested. And everyone who wants to call out John Schneider, and there's a lot of people right now, this is a good game to kind of test what kind of draft class he had. And obviously it's a first start for a lot of these low-level drafted guys, but this is a really good.
It is. I will say, I mean, I'll say this, it's going to fall on deaf ears, but I'm going to say it anyway. I hope that if Mike Jarrell has a bad game, people don't just jump on him as being a terrible player. Like, this is a really tough situation. Like I said, we've seen first round top 10 picks struggle their entire first seasons. So like, this is not a game where you can just say he's bad or good. You're just hoping to see some opportunity of like some potential there. The other guys that are inactive today, Trey Brown, Reek Woolen, we knew about that. Satoa Lomea, always inactive, not surprised there. Stone Forsythe, we knew about that. These other names, though, we learned a little today, Jeff. So Roy Robertson Harris is active. Really excited to see him. Byron Murphy is active and back. Great news there. Cam Young, inactive. I thought he played two snaps against San Francisco, and one of those 2 snaps was atrocious and led to a 36-yard, 38-yard run by Jordan Mason, or at least contributed to it. Miles Adams inactive, which means that Mike Morris is active. Interesting to see Mike Morris is still ahead of Miles Adams in that rotation. I was kind of thinking Mike Morris would be inactive. And then Trevis Gibson, your favorite player. He is best buds with Roy Robertson Harris, but he is inactive, healthy inactive for the second, I think, game in a row. That's one to watch. Like, what's his future with this team, and what does that mean for the edge position? Are the Seahawks going to be back looking for edge help potentially? What's the deal there? What did you think about those inactive?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because, again, you did that show after the Niners game, kind of highlighting some of the issues they had in run defense. And when they made the Robertson Harris trade, a lot of people thought, oh, maybe this is just overkill or maybe this is injury related. But when you watch some of those bad issues up front, and the front has been getting some of the criticism that I don't think is justified, but Adams and Morris and Young looked pretty bad in that game. And they look like a team that just, again, one injury away from disaster. And well, we saw what happened. Hankins was playing too many snaps, and there was a domino effect where they just didn't have the bodies. And then you see them make a trade, and the guy coming in from London is active, and some of those guys aren't. I think we have the right read. And unfortunately, some of those depth guys we were hoping, and again, Cam Young is coming off pretty serious injuries, so I'm not writing him off yet. But him, Morris, Miles Adams, I thought Miles Adams was going to get released, but if someone else went on IR, I think it was Burns to save his roster spot. But yeah, those guys at the bottom of the roster have not played well. And then you mentioned Gibson, who's the guy that I thought was atrocious in that Detroit game. Like,
Yeah.
He was the one who led up that Jared Goff receiving touchdown. He was blown off the edge. He was, and there was the point where all the guys are crying for Darryl Taylor now. And it doesn't look good when they kind of went one for one to replace him. Darryl Taylor's been a productive pass rusher, and despite some of his obvious flaws, that move has not looked good. And again, since I saw that one game where he just looked awful, like it was hard to look that bad, I thought maybe he'd get better. But the fact that they've made him inactive, it's not a great look for him. It doesn't seem like he's not a great win from the personnel side right there. That looks like a bad move.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you got to give him a little bit of grace in that Uchenna Nwosu gets injured in the last preseason game. They weren't expecting that, and if Uchenna Nwosu's healthy, Trevis Gibson's not on this team. They were getting rid of Darryl Taylor for other reasons entirely. They didn't plan on having him. They didn't want him here. I think Mike Jackson, same situation. Everyone's bemoaning these things. Those guys weren't going to be here regardless. And we can debate whether that's good or bad, but that's just the reality. Darryl Taylor's in a better position, a better place for him, a better scheme for him. Good for him. But it is interesting to see what's going on there at the defensive line. I'm eager to see that defensive line today. That would be the thing that I think would hurt me the most is if they have these guys, they have their horses up front, and if they're still not effective and physical at the point, that I'm going to have a hard time with, Jeff. Like, there's a lot of ways this game could go, and I'll never be happy after a loss. But there's a lot of ways this could go, and I could be like, fuck, fine, whatever. But if they're still physically moved off the ball and we're not seeing the defensive line make plays, that would be hard for me.
I think that's the most important thing in this game. And I'm at the point now, like, I'm just trying to evaluate what the Seahawks are good at, what they can build on for the future, what is the team's identity. And you look at like where they've drafted and what they should be good at with the coach they have and the scheme they have. They should they should have a good defensive line with that. Those two, like when they had Murphy and Williams and Reed healthy, like they were a really good front. And then you add Mafe and Hall, like the amount of resource they put in there with this coach. Like if they come out and they just suck up front again, that's really discouraging because that's really should be the core of your team and the core of your defense right now. Like if the offensive line comes out and doesn't have a good game, like I'm not going to be like discouraged. It's just more of the same. But this has to be like the building block for this group on defense because corner is the other one and they're missing everyone other than Witherspoon. So that's an acceptable place where I can, like, I'm not going to be too upset if they suck there. But if they suck up front with everyone back with the 10 days off, there's just no excuse. That's a red flag. And that's probably the number one area I'm focusing on in this game more than anything else because I think for them to kind of move forward here, they need to have building blocks. They need to develop an identity. For me, it's got to start there.
Yeah, I think it's 100% true. I got a couple chats we'll get to. Dennis Williams says he can confirm that he saw me enjoying Oktoberfest this weekend. It's true. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. There's one band, the woman would turn any song into an Oktoberfest song. So like Dancing Queen was Yodel Queen, and she'd yodel through. Like it was sounds awful, and it was kitschy awful, but it was pretty fun. And especially when you add some Oktoberfest beer into the mix. Tony Bag of Donuts, one of my favorite users and members here, has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Really, really appreciate this, Tony. Super generous thing to do. Brings other people into the crew. And also, if you're someone that got one of these free 1-month memberships, consider paying it forward. If you get one, give one, donate one to somebody else. Make sure you re-up to stay part of the community. Join over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Be part of this crew. We've got a really, really cool group. Everyone's very generous. And as an example of the kind of generosity and the kind of cool things we're doing here, right now we've got a special deal. JK Boots, a Spokane-based boot maker, working with us. If you use code HawkBlogger, you get 10% off any pair of boots you buy. And you get entered to win a custom-made Seahawks theme bison leather boot. I mean, it's going to be amazing. You're going to be the only one that has these things. But the cool thing, and this is part of the community that we were building, is when we have sold 10 boots using code HawkBlogger, we are going to give away a pair of boots to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation. So a firefighter in the Pacific Northwest is booted up properly to keep our forests safe and our people safe. So this is what we do. Win, win, win. Go over to jkboots.com, use code HawkBlogger, get a great pair of boots for yourself or someone else, and enter to win a Seahawks theme boot and help a wildland firefighter get the right equipment to make sure he keeps us and everyone else safe. All right, Jeff, there's a new segment that I've introduced, and it's our voicemail segment. It starts this way with a theme song that I think you'll enjoy. Let's kick it off.
Time to rise and shine, it's clear. HB Morning's voicemail's here. Play and laugh, let go of fear. Start your day with cheer, my dear.
If you don't find that funny, I don't know, man. I like, people are like, oh man, AI music's awful. It is, but it's funny. Like, how do you not find that funny? So we got a voicemail that is specifically for you, Jeff. And so I want to play that for you right now and take a listen to what Deborah had to say.
Hey, Brian, my name is Deborah. I am a brand new listener to your show, your podcast. Just been listening for a couple months. And I wanted to pass something funny along to you that, which is about Jeff Simmons. I have heard him talking on your show several times over the last couple months where he's been reviewing games and he talks about penalties. And I never knew what that was. I'd never heard that term before, but I don't know a whole lot about football. So I'm like, it's very possible that this is just some kind of a trick play or something that I've never heard of. I was Googling, I'm like, what is a penalty? And not finding anything. So finally, a few days ago, I decided to go to Reddit on the NFL Noobs group, and I posted my question. And people got back to me saying, I think that this guy that you heard is probably saying penalties. And I was like, oh my God, yes, that's it. He is trying to say penalties, but he's got that thick Canadian accent, and it's just sounding like penalties. And I just laughed so hard when I realized what an idiot I was. But I just thought you might find that amusing. Thank you so much for your show. I've learned so much about football already. Clearly, I have a lot more to learn. But thanks so much. Bye-bye.
I can't believe Deborah's never heard of penalties before. That's amazing.
I listened to that. I laughed, man. I was like, I can't wait to play that for Jeff.
I don't get told I have a Canadian accent a lot. A lot of Canadians tell me I sound American. So
I was going to say, I've never thought of you as having a Canadian accent, but
I don't get that one.
I'm now gonna listen for it. And
Maybe I'm mumbling. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's your Canadian internet jumbling your words. It's possible that's.
Oh, that's
But
bad.
that was great. And thank you, Deborah, for sending
was
that.
awesome.
If you want to send a voicemail, it can be on any topic. It can be on football. It can be career advice. It could be random things, a joke you want to tell, whatever you want to send. Open up the voice memo app on your phone, record a voice memo, email it to me at brian@hawkblogger.com. I will screen them, so there are limits to what I'm willing to play, but we're going to get you guys on the show through these voicemails. It's been great so far. Would love to get more. So brian@hawkblogger.com, record a voice memo and send it my way. And yes, you're going to continue to get to hear that amazing intro to the voicemail segment throughout the year and the week. All right, Jeff, getting back to this game. The Falcons. Falcons also had some potential injury issues coming in. Justin Simmons was a guy that they thought, was a question about whether or not he was going to be active. He is active today. I think that if I look at Falcons, let me pull it up. Their inactive list. They are without Antonio Hamilton, Troy Anderson, Brandon Dorless. Interesting. He's not going so well. I saw some Falcons fans annoyed about the fact that he's still inactive. Jovan Gwynn, Elijah Wilkinson, Brandon Parker, Contavious Street. I think that out of those guys, Jeff, Troy Anderson's a starter.
Yeah.
But if I look at the Falcons depth chart, Antonio Hamilton, is he? I don't think he's a starter either. I'm looking around here just to make sure. Antonio Hamilton Sr.
I believe he's a depth safety.
Yes, you're right. He's a backup nickelback is what it's saying here. Okay. I can kind of check to see if any of these guys have gotten snaps, but I mean, Falcons are relatively healthy coming into this game, right? So, I mean, I don't know that there's any injury. I mean, Troy Anderson is, a starter for them and a valuable player for them. Lorenzo Carter was a guy that was he was questionable this week. He seems like he is active and available. So that he's one of their edge players. As we talked about, Justin Simmons is there. Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates are these big name veterans. They aren't what they used to be as players. But when you look at this defense, Jeff, I mean, it's one of the worst pass rushing defenses in the NFL. I mean, it is the worst based on a number of ways you look at it. And they've struggled to defend the run. So, I mean, if the Seahawks get the ball first in this game, if they get the kickoff, what do you want to see them do on first down?
Play action pass to the middle of the field.
Okay. I like that. I like that because it's not even as simple as run or pass. It is prey on the fact that that they know you want to run the ball and try to take advantage of it right away. Say we're not going to be predictable.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'd like to see more from Grubb, I know this shows up in the numbers, is they've gone a little either predictable in terms of like run and pass, or they've been too pass heavy, but their play action numbers have been really low. And it's an area on their team, especially with their offensive line issues, that should be an important part of how they play because their personnel is set up to be really well and kind of mask some of their deficiencies when they're not as predictable. Like they did run the ball a little more early last game, which was okay, but it just puts a lot of emphasis on third down with the rookie right tackle and the guard issues. It's a lot to just try to set up third and manageable. I don't think that's the best way to play. I think you got to be off balance. I think you got to be a little unpredictable. And I think that's what I would like to see more from Grubb today. And overall, this is a game Geno Smith and the offense need to play well if the Seahawks want to win. The Giants game was pretty mediocre and the San Francisco game was a step back. So this is a game where bad pass rush indoors, lots of their skill players all their skill players are playing. I want to see them be a little more creative, a little more predictable, and try to hit some of those vertical and attack the middle of that field because they're not great at the linebacker level. And you mentioned Lorenzo Carter. He was put on IR yesterday. I just saw that myself. So he's not playing. It's going to be
yeah. I don't know. Maybe that's why he's on IR. That's why he
yeah.
didn't show up as
So
an
I
inactive.
think Arnold Ebiketie, who was a Seahawk Twitter fanboy, I think he's going to start at edge. He was picked a couple picks before Boye Mafe, and Boye has been significantly better than him. But so they're not too banged up, but their linebacker / edge guys, there's not a lot there. So that's a position they hopefully attack. I don't want them to be as pass heavy as they've been because they have the offensive line problem, especially right tackle. I want them to run the ball, but I want them to be creative in how they do it.
Yeah, and I wanna offer some news, some unfortunate news that I just been picking up here on Twitter. This is reported from Chris Egan of King 5. This is literally 28 minutes ago. Says, my heart's breaking this morning. We lost a sports broadcasting legend. Tony Ventrella of King 5 Seattle has passed away at the age of 80. He's with his family by his side. So that's awful. Really sorry to hear that. And so folks that know Tony, know his family, obviously send our best to them. And he's been a fixture in Seattle sports for many, many years, beloved, I think, by everybody, and lived a very full and enriching life for a lot of people. So sorry to hear that, but also, celebrating what's been a pretty special life that he led through that. So some sobering news. Sorry to bring things down, but I think that's a pretty important one to share with folks as we go through it. So when we turn our attention to the Seahawks defense and we talk about a defense that is getting back Byron Murphy, we're going to see Roy Robertson Harris for the first time. We are going to see a decently healthy front seven, but we're going to be without Reek Woolen. We're going to be without Trey Brown, Artie Burns. It's thin. It's thin at the secondary position without Rayshon Jenkins. Obviously, should add that in. What do you think's a realistic expectation? Like, what's a top end expectation for what the secondary can do in this game?
I just think they have to limit the damage. Don't get beat over the top. Don't give up huge plays. I think they're going to have trouble defending some of their players, but essentially, be competent. Don't be a disaster. I think that's a reasonable expectation. They're playing practice squad level players. They're playing Nehemiah Pritchett, who is more of a raw player coming in. They're missing 1 to 4 of their cornerback, and then basically 1 to 5 if you eliminate Mike Jackson from what they started with. And so I don't expect them to come out here and dominate Drake London in the slot or something, because Drake London's been really good the last couple of weeks, and he's been having mismatches lining up in the slot. So I think it's just keep guys in front of you. Don't get beat over the top. Darnell Mooney's a really fast receiver who can cause trouble. I think really that's a fair expectation. Just try to be as competent as possible, be in position. Don't blow assignments.
Yeah, I think you're a little lower on this group than I am.
Probably.
And I know you well enough by now to know when you're just you're kind of in your depression spiral about something on the Seahawks, and the secondary for you really hit you this week. You're like, God dang it, we finally get healthy one place, and now we lose these guys. Everything's crap. Which is probably a safe emotional place to start from. But here's the thing. I mean, first of all, just to be clear, these aren't practice squad level guys. Pritchett was on the roster. Kayvon Wallace, free agent, has been a starter for other teams. Kobe Bryant was a starter at nickel for an entire season a couple years ago, and obviously has been on the roster. These aren't your best players, and these aren't players that you want to say are the best. But I don't think they're quite. It's not like 4th or 5th string right tackle level like we're doing on that side of the ball. So I think that those guys are going to be out there a lot. And I'm curious, Jeff, one of the things you said about Drake London, he does play in the slot a lot. One of the questions is, well, can they play Devin Witherspoon in the slot without, the other guys that they have available? I'm wondering if they're going to have him travel with Drake London, because he can play outside and he can play in. they want him. They want Devin Witherspoon to be in the nickel sometimes. They want him available as a blitzer. They want him available in other things. I mean, if he's able to match up with Drake London and he's able to do a decent job on him, that would go a long way. I do think Darnell Mooney is the guy that I'm a little bit more concerned about in this game. I think he's a guy that could show up and be a pain in the Seahawks' ass. He's made some really nice catches this year when I've watched Falcons games, some big catches at big moments. And so it's that other side where if I'm most skeptical, it's probably about Nehemiah Pritchett. And I have to admit, even through my skepticism, he's had some good moments in his first few games. So maybe he's gaining a little confidence. Maybe he'll play a little better. I'm a little worried he's going to get picked on today.
Yeah, that's the scary matchup. I imagine that those two will be lined up a lot on the far side of the field. And Mooney's just like a pro, and he's got deep speed, and he's pretty crafty, and he's been really good. Like you said, the last couple of games where the Falcons offense has broken out, he's been a big part of it. So I think you're right. I think that's the matchup that kind of would scare Seahawk fans. And I like your call out on Witherspoon. I think that's a good move to kind of line him up on London and kind of have him trying to impact the game a little bit more. And it's not been his fault. It's just more of the natural position he plays where he kind of gets isolated and teams avoid him. And you can see that again where they can kind of target the other guys on the team. So this is a game where that matchup, to me, that's been the one I've been kind of focusing on all week. Can they hold up against him? Like some people think they should double team one of those guys and then put the other corner on the other one. That's what New England used to do. But that's a huge matchup in this game. They can't let those guys get over the top. They can't let those guys have big plays because they can run the ball. They have a pretty good line. And this is a game where you're going to need the pass rush to step up because Cousins is like the old Jared Goof stuff. Cousins under pressure versus Cousins when he's protected, completely different player.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a good line. It's pretty solid at all 5 spots. And with Seahawks pressure players, they need to disrupt because if they just leave it too much on these corners, I think that's a lot to ask today.
Yeah, the way I'm kind of thinking about the secondary today, Jeff, is they're going to give up yards. They're going to give up points. And like it's just going to happen. I don't know who's going to do it, but they're probably all going to take turns doing that. What we need from the secondary is 1 to 2 plays.
Yeah.
They need to make 1 to 2 plays. Those could be plays to get off the field on a third down in a critical moment to just give them a chance for the offense to get some breathing room. It could be turnovers. They've been so few takeaways. And one thing Kobe Bryant did, even as a rookie, is while he was often giving up passes, he often also was knocking out fumbles. Like he caused more fumbles than almost any player in the NFL that year. I think he finished tied for first in terms of forced fumbles in the NFL that year, with 4. So if he can punch one out today, if Witherspoon can make a big play, anybody, Julian Love can get a pick, something like that. Even if they give up 350 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, if they can get the interception, if they can get a couple plays, that might be the difference in them being able to win this. But it's hard for me to imagine the Seahawks winning this game without a great offensive performance. I think the offense has to put up, I think it has to be like 400-yard kind of day. I think you have to talk 30-plus points. I think that's where you feel like the offense they're healthy enough, even with the right tackle situation, they're healthy enough that they should be able to move the ball on this Falcons defense.
Oh yeah, I think that's the biggest thing of the game. And this isn't a defense that this has been Carolina was moving the ball at will against them last week. Tampa Bay, the Thursday nighter before that should have won the game pretty easily. They took a pretty wild series of events, but regardless, they were moving the ball up and down the field against them pretty comfortably. Unless the right side of the line is just a total disaster, there's just it'd be really hard to swallow if their offense isn't really good today. And I think that's the key to the game. This is going to be a high scoring game, in my opinion. This is going to be some of those Detroit games in past years. I think the script is very similar to those Detroit games where they just need to turn over to swing the game. They need their offense to play well. It's indoors. It's against a defense that doesn't have a lot in terms of personnel. There's chances to attack. I think it's got to be the same script as those games. And Geno's played his best ball indoors. It's happened time and time again. It happened again in Detroit this year. They have all the skill guys. There's weapons to attack. This is a game Ryan Grubb needs to be a lot better. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the key to this game more than anything is that the offense needs to dictate terms. If they can play from a lead a bit, I think that's a big deal. They really haven't the last 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they had. No, I don't think there's been a point other than the 100-yard touchdown. I don't know if there's been a point with the lead the last 3 weeks. So they need to play with the lead. I think it sets up really well for their personnel today. And if they're constantly chasing with that right side of the line, the game could get trickier than it needs to be. And we just hope it doesn't spiral. But yeah, everything, you study the Falcons, you study where they were playing. This needs to be a big offensive game, not just from Geno, from the whole offense.
Yeah, I was a little bummed. I didn't remember that the Falcons stadium has a retractable roof or a roof open possibility. And so it's open today.
Oh.
I was hoping we would get indoor Geno, dome Geno, but this will not count in the Geno King of Dome calculations. So that's a little bit lame. But I think... I'm curious. I want your opinion because I'm obviously very biased towards Geno. With everything that's come out, like I think we were all like, Geno played a crap game against the 49ers. With things that have come out since, has your opinion changed at all about Geno in that game?
Not really.
Yeah.
I don't know if the problem with him is he was just missing throws that he normally hits. And he seemed to be too affected by Nick Bosa, and he was throwing off his back foot. And it's just been a pattern with them, but I don't think it's as bad as like it was out. Like the interception was a miscommunication. DK, I think, logically took the blame on that. But just like the first interception, some of the stuff he did, it was just uncharacteristic.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's just throws, and I think Mike Holmgren was talking about it, where it's just there's a couple basic throws over the middle early in the game that he just wasn't hitting. We've seen him hit all year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the stuff where I know some of the turnovers might have been unfairly put on him, but the body language stuff, I still have mostly the same evaluation. I need to see more.
Yeah, that's actually kind of where I'm at too, for what it's worth. It was not a great game for him. It has come out, so some of those things were not his fault, but I still, I watched that game. He was missing throws he normally makes, and I thought his body language in the last 2 games has not been great. And so I am curious if this extra time off, maybe even going down and watching his cousin play in Oregon and just kind of getting out of the building. And it wasn't just him down there. Jonathan Hankins was down there. Like there's some other Ohio State guys. I think JSN was down there. JSN had to be wearing a Ducks jersey around the locker room this week, which is pretty funny. So, this is a big game for Geno. Like this is like he needs to win this game. And I can understand from his perspective, whereas like he felt like he was doing things he needed to win the last game, and then his own players were were making that harder than it needed to be, and how frustrating that must be. But he can't be turning the ball over. There can be no reasons to do that. He needs to protect it. And I think the other thing I'm really curious about, Jeff, this is the heaviest zone team that the Seahawks have faced this year. I'm curious how Grubb attacks zone. I'm curious how Geno will play against it. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for checkdowns, for seam passes over the middle or dump offs over the middle that cause, for the defense to like rally to the ball. Is Geno going to take those? How is he going to do in that situation? Are they going to find holes? Are there going to be plays that like manipulate the zone? We don't really know how they do as well against the zone, or how they attack a defense that's primarily a cover 3 defense, which is just not played as much as it was during the Legion of Boom era.
Yeah, and you're right that Grubb should know this defense, but Geno should know this defense pretty well. They've played against Raheem Morris multiple times in the last few years with the Rams. And it's not the same scheme that they were running with Raheem, but it's pretty similar to what the Rams were doing. They just don't have Aaron Donald. So it looks a lot different. But Geno should know his defense. And I think Robert Mays, when he comes on your show, talks about kind of the issue with Geno so well, and that he makes the throws that no one else kind of dares to make, but sometimes he just passes up easier throws. And he went through a couple plays last week where he just needed to go to his next read, and there was stuff there. And I think this is a game where you hope that he kind of makes that extra read. They kind of have that in the game plan. I think the 10 days was a big reset for him. This is the game I've been kind of pointing to for a while. I think the 3 games in 11 days, I know everyone will make that an excuse. I think that's super real. I think we saw it with the Saints, and the vibe in that building could not have been good, just how things had spiraled. And he had that time to reset. I'm with you. I think this is a game where I know we talked about Geno, but I think Geno's always kind of going uphill with this pass protection issues, and it unfairly gets put on a lot on his shoulders when you look at like Jared Goff, and he's got the best offensive line. They're like, oh, look how consistent he is. But yeah, if Geno, Geno wants to be a $50 million quarterback, he wants to be the franchise quarterback of this team. It's unfair to put so much on one game, but this game feels like the inflection point of the season spiraling or the season getting back on track. And I know that's kind of insane to say for week 7 with their injuries, a right tackle and a corner, but it just feels the way their schedule sets up, the way the vibes are, the way the kind of failing of the fan base. So yeah, unfortunately, like unfair as it is, there is a lot on Geno today. He needs to have a good game for a narrative, for the team, for so many reasons, just for the matchup. And yeah, we're all going to be watching him close. Again, he wants to be paid. We kind of get the idea of where Schneider views Geno. And like, if you're like, oh, Quinn Ewers, maybe we can draft him. I don't know if you saw him yesterday. He was atrocious yesterday. He got benched. And so this is such an important game for a lot of reasons. And I think we're all going to be watching Geno pretty closely.
Yeah, dude. I'm even watching chat right now is funny. I mean, people are saying I'm flipping on Geno. That's the farthest from the truth. But look, it is a fragile state in Seahawks fandom right now. And
oh my God,
they drop this game, decent chance they also drop the next game, it's bad. And I think people are in a giving up on them kind of mindset. The opposite can be true. And I'll tell you, Jeff, if you told me which roster would you rather have, the players that are active and healthy, which roster would you rather have? I would rather have the Seahawks roster. Like the Falcons offensive line, I certainly would like to have that. I'm not going to lie. I still would say Charles Cross might be the best offensive lineman in this game between both teams. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't just make a line out of one player.
No.
But go.
No, the guard Chris Lindstrom is pretty good, but
yeah. So my point is that the Seahawks have enough horses to win this game, and this is a big Mike McDonald game as well.
It is.
Time after time, he kind of says, "Yeah, we had a good practice. I like the way things are. I like where our minds are." And then the team hasn't come out right. There's a 10 a.m. game. They came out slow for their other 10 a.m. game in New England. Does he it's not a matter of lack of practice now or lack of rest. Do you have secondary bust I can kind of get behind because you got all these new guys. But are these guys ready to play, and do they come out and execute today?
That's, again, I pointed to this game for a long time for that exact reason. All the excuses now are kind of out the window. I know we have some injury excuses still if certain positions blow up, but the things that you want to see on well-coached teams is how are their fundamentals? Are they taking penalties consistently? And do they look ready to play? And do they have a strategy to attack the other team? And we've seen issues. That's usually the sign of good coaching. Do you win with details? In the first 3 games, that's what made Seattle. They seem so buttoned up. And the last 3 weeks, it's just unraveled. And so the people who wanted to turn on McDonald, they've had the script to it because the offense, the defense, the special teams have not looked on their details. They haven't looked like they've been ready to play. And their fundamentals being that poor is usually a reflection of the coaching. So this is a game where they've had the time to kind of have that mini bye, reassess everything. McDonald's talked about they had that kind of reassessment of what went wrong. How do we attack it? The Seahawks are a talented team. I have some questions about their team building and whether they're built correctly. And I think there's a big difference, and a lot of people don't misunderstand this. I was having an argument with someone offline the other day where he's like, the Seahawks have no talent. I'm like, actually, I think they have a lot of talent. It's just probably in the wrong places. But ideally, you want to be built like kind of how the Chargers are going. Defense, offensive line, quarterback, and then put the other final pieces around. But the Seahawks have a lot of talent, and the coach was brought in to kind of scheme around some of their limitations and maximize what they have. And when things go the way they went the last 3 weeks relative to the first 3 weeks, I kind of understand why everyone's come to that, but it's gone out of control. Really, the head job of a head coach, different than the coordinator, is to stop the bleeding of a head team, fix the problem. We need to see him, and that's, I think, what Pete lost the last few years. He couldn't fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why McDonald was brought in, and we want to see the first steps of it.
Yeah. If I could get a honest answer on one question from Mike McDonald right now, and there's probably better ones, but the one that's been really burned in my brain is, how do you decide when it's the player, and how do you decide when it's the coaching, like when you need to change? And like, because this season, so much about it is evaluating, like, are they going to bring these guys back because you can say, hey, they've had 1 year in the system and they'll be better in the next year, and I believe that these are the right guys. Or you're like, actually, we've learned these are not the right guys, we need to bring in other guys. And they're doing that across so many positions, Jeff, that I kind of find myself just wondering, at what point does he say, no, I want to start over with somebody else, versus this is going to be so much better next year once we've had a full off season and a full, like, he's going to have to make that decision across the board almost on this defense.
That's what this year's about to me at this point. Like, obviously, I would love to see them turn around, make a playoff push. If San Francisco loses today, they could be in first place in the division if they win this game. But I take more of the big picture view. I'm tired of being like the middling team that's kind of not maximizing what they have and being this. They really have no identity right now. So I think that's like, I would love for you to have a beer with him and kind of talk about that off the record, because he would never answer that well publicly.
No.
And that's where being around kind of helps. You can develop those relationships. But it's such an interesting thing. And that's really what I'm looking for. Like, who are the guys that we can bring forward with this team? That's what I've been asking the last few years, but they switch schemes. Like someone like Draymond Jones just seems completely miscast, which we called months ago. We said that in February. We thought he'd get cut. But we need to see, like, other than Leonard Williams right now and Boye and some of the other guys in the corners, we're left with questions that, who are these linebackers worth keeping? Are these safeties worth keeping? Well, Julian Love's going to be sticking around for a while. But the defensive linemen, the edge guys, like, so many of these players, that's such a hard question to answer, because I'm sure if you got him with some truth serum, he'd be like, I just don't have the dudes right now.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why they didn't bring in more guys from Baltimore. And I should have brought at least one or two guys in to kind of set the tone of this, is kind of teach the other guys on the defense. And maybe he didn't like Queen. Maybe he didn't like Geno Stone. Not like those guys are crushing.
Geno Stone's looked pretty bad in Cincinnati.
Looked like a merchant of the defense. But like, even when like Rex Ryan went to the Jets years ago, like, they brought in Bart Scott to be like the brain of the defense. And I don't know who that guy was, because Clowney's been uneventful and injured, and we know his issue. Matabuke got $23 million a year, so maybe it just didn't line up. But that's where I think they kind of miss that right now, having that kind of veteran guy to teach them. And Patrick Green would look pretty nice right now. But that's off season again. It's going to be so telling to see how this lines up for the rest of the year. I know I saw a question like, what would it take for McDonald to be fired? I'm like, I don't think there's a scenario where he gets fired.
It should not be on the table.
The owner was out with them after the Niners game. So
yeah. I want to ask you, last thing before we'll get off and go watch the game. I'm going to ask you, after I do this little bump here, for who are you looking forward to watching most on offense and defense? One player each on offense and defense in the game today. Before I do, just a reminder, folks, head over to jkboots.com, use promo code HawkBlogger, get you 10% off your order. And every purchase gets you entered to win a custom Seahawks themed boot, bison leather. It's amazing. It's being one of a kind. It'll be designed just for your feet. All you got to do is use code HawkBlogger. And when we sell 10 boots, we are going to give a pair away to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation. So a firefighter can help protect our forests, protect us, and the beautiful Pacific Northwest. So all great stuff. Use code HawkBlogger over at JK Boots. You or whoever you buy these for will greatly appreciate it. All right, Jeff, who are your two players? One on offense, one on defense.
On defense is Byron Murphy.
Hmm.
I've really missed him. I think the defense has really missed him. And I think a lot of stuff that he does, you can't always see it on first watch. Like some of the stuff he breaks double teams and what he can do. But I think he's going to be motivated. He's talked about it this week. I think we're going to see some flash plays from him. And I just think he's going to cause some disruption that just hasn't been there. Offensively, I think it's Kenneth Walker, assuming he doesn't have like COVID or food poisoning or something where he's just barely playing. But look, the receivers have disappointed me right now, all three of them in different ways. But I think this is a game where they could flash, and probably that might be a better answer. But I think Walker, just with his ability to take over the game as a passer, as an outlet player, as a game breaker in this kind of speed and the track, we've seen him have some good games indoors as well. Detroit, the Chargers a couple of years ago. His speed and his explosion works really well on this kind of fast track. And so I think he's a guy who can just take over the game. And we saw it at points in that Detroit game. He looked like the best player on the field at times. And I think this is another game where that could happen.
I think those are two great picks. My two would be Roy Robertson-Harris on defense. I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think he's going to look different. I think he's going to make the defense look a little different. He is so much more physical, so much stronger than a lot of the guys they've been running out there. Even Byron Murphy, who I love, is an undersized defensive tackle. Roy Robertson is every bit as 6'5", 290 and is strong as a bull. So I'm looking forward to seeing him knock some guys back in this game. And then on offense, Mike Jarrell. I mean, I'm just looking forward to seeing what that guy can do. I don't think he's going to be the best player on the field by any stretch, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how he plays. Jeff, thank you so much for helping countdown to kickoff with us, as I wouldn't know what I would have done for the last hour. I certainly wasn't going to watch that awful game in London.
I watched.
Yeah, I know you did. You're a glutton. So we will be back. I will do a post-game show. We'll see which folks we can bring with us for the post-game show. So keep an eye on that. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. Make sure you click like and subscribe. Would appreciate it. Head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up to be part of the community. And we will see you all after the game. Let's hope we get a good Seahawks performance that we can all be proud of. It's been a while since we could say that. So let's get one of those today. Let's cheer our guys on and keep the muzzles pointed out of the foxhole, folks. No friendly fire. Be kind to each other. We all get frustrated one way or another, but let's come out the other end proud of how we handled ourselves. So take care. Go Hawks. I'll see you all in a little bit.